Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. In my last video, I talked about my evil Dark Urge run, and I thought some of you might have been interested in the builds I used while I went through this run. So we'll start with my main character, which was actually Azog, the Defiler, who of course is famous from Hobbit lore. So since I was playing as Azog, I decided to choose an orc, give him that pale skin look. By the way, I think he looks absolutely fantastic. Orcs are really nice for frontline fighters in Baldur's Gate 3. They get a couple of traits that really make them interesting. First and foremost, they can do more damage with melee critical hits. And if they're reduced to 0 hit points instead, they'll stand up with just 1 hit point. So it becomes much more difficult for enemies to permanently get them down. So just all around a great option. And for Zog, what interests me for this playthrough is I wanted to have a build that was geared around him being a person who was absolutely infuriated that he was unable to kill the dwarves when they are up in the trees and they ended up being rescued by the eagles. So he would be someone who always kept a spear or a harpoon or something on him so that if that ever happened again, he could be sure to sling that thing into the air and hit at least one of the dwarves in the throat before they were able to get away. So because of that, I decided to be a barbarian because that's going to give me the flexibility to gear myself around throwing weapons. And it was an absolute blast to play this way the entire game. So Barbarian is going to give you rage, and as I mentioned, it's going to give you additional damage not only when you're throwing weapons, but also just melee damage and improvised weapons in general. It's also going to give you resistance to physical damage and advantage on strength checks and saves. So just absolutely great to have as a frontline fighter. And then we are also going to be able to pick up unarmored defense. So you're going to be able to add your Constitution modifier to your AC. Now, this only is triggered when you are not wearing armor. So I really enjoy this type of build because it's a way to be defensive without having to throw on heavy armor. There's some really interesting clothing options that interact well with barbarian mechanics. So this is absolutely great to have. Now, in addition to all this, playing as a barbarian is going to give you martial weapon proficiencies. And this is great because it means that just about all the weapons in the game can be wielded by you. It does give you some armor proficiencies as well, but that won't matter for this build. We're going to be going completely with clothing and we're not going to be wielding shields either. Now, when it comes to the abilities, obviously you want your strength to be sky high. It is your primary ability, so you're going to put that +2 bonus there. You also want dexterity as high as it can possibly be as well. This is going to add to your AC, and even more importantly, it's going to add to your initiative. And it's really important in Baldur's Gate 3 that all of your party members have as high initiative as possible. What order you go in and having the ability to get the jump on enemies really helps you throughout the game. So 16 is the max score that you can get with a +1 bonus. You kind of want that on your party members every single time. Constitution at 14. Obviously we're frontline fighters, so we want this as high as we can get it while still having an even number. We don't need intelligence or charisma, so we can completely dump both of those. And then we have a couple of points left over. Wisdom saving throws are checked oftentimes when you're dealing with crowd control spells. So it's nice leaving this at 10, if not adding a couple of points to it to make you a little more defensive. Now, looking at our skills, athletics is a must-have as a frontline fighter. It's going to prevent enemies from being able to push you around, which they will definitely try to do, especially on tactician, which is the difficulty that I did this playthrough on. We also get proficiency in medicine automatically. This is virtually worthless. There's only a couple of times in the game where this even comes up, and none of them are particularly relevant or important. Perception is a big deal in this game, and most of your other party members don't come with proficiency in perception automatically. So you coming into this game with it definitely helps a lot. So highly recommend selecting this here. And then you automatically get intimidation. So I went through this playthrough with Azog handling almost all of the dialogue checks, but I also just went with whatever happened. So if he failed, he failed. It's whatever. I already had a will playthrough where I was able to pass all these checks, so I was interested in seeing what it was like when you couldn't necessarily pass all of them. So for me, having intimidation helped because every so often I would be able to win those checks. But for you, you might decide that you want somebody else in your party to handle all of the conversation options anyway. So this might not matter all that much to you. Okay, so next up is level 2. We're going to still be sticking with Barbarian. You're going to get Danger Sense, which gives you advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells, and surfaces. Traps doesn't matter because you should be picking up traps, not stepping onto them and having to deal with a saving throw. And surfaces doesn't matter that much because while it does come up every so often where you have to travel over a difficult terrain type of surface, it's not frequent enough for this to really matter. Having advantage on dexterity saving throws against spells, though, is pretty nice. It means that when enemies drop things like Fireball on you, you're going to be a little bit better than most of the other characters at trying to resist those effects and limit the damage that imposes upon you. So that part of this is nice. The other thing we get is reckless attack. Until your next turn, you have advantage on attack rolls, but enemies also have advantage against you. You should absolutely be using this all the time. Enemies having advantage against you doesn't work because for barbarians, their defensiveness really comes from having insanely high HP pools, and so they'll get hit, but they can just absorb that damage and still keep on swinging. So it doesn't matter to you that enemies can hit you easier. Also, this goes back to why it's so important to have high initiative. You and your entire team should be getting the jump on enemies and wiping out several of them before they even have a chance to take a turn, which also is going to mitigate and limit how much damage your character takes, while at the same time you'll have advantage on your attack rolls and you should be dealing out a ton of damage. So just all the way around, this is great to have. And then at level 3, we're still going to be a barbarian, and we're going to get an additional rage charge, which is going to give you more opportunities to rage. Now for subclass, we're going to choose Berserker, and that's going to change our rage into a frenzy. And the advantage of frenzy is that it's going to give you a couple of different bonus attacks that you can use during your turn. So one of them is a frenzy strike, which as a bonus action allows you to make another melee attack with your equipped weapon. Now the disadvantage of this is it's going to apply a stack of frenzied strain, which adds a penalty to attack rolls every time you use it. This sounds bad, but honestly, most fights are relatively short. And so having 1 or 2 stacks of this isn't really a big deal because it's not like you're going to be able to get to the point where you have like a stack of 10. Again, I just did a run on Tactician. I use Frenzy Strike all the time. It was never really a big deal. The other option that you have here is Enraged Throw, which is going to allow you to do a throw action as a bonus action. And you're going to deal additional damage, and you have the chance of knocking an enemy prone. And enemies who are prone have disadvantage on strength and dexterity saving throws, and attacks against a prone creature have advantage if they're made within 3 meters of the creature, which probably doesn't help you when you're using throwing weapons, but it'll help any other party members that might be close by, which in my playthrough would have been Minthara and Shadowheart. So just all the way around, this is great because it's going to give you basically a third attack that you can do during your turn. The regular base one, you're going to get an extra attack that can also be done as a throw, and then you can use this. So great to have. Berserker goes fantastic with what we want to do. At level 4, we get to choose a feat, and I would take Great Weapon Master. What this is going to do is automatically add 10 damage to all of your melee weapon attacks, while also imposing a -5 attack roll penalty on those attacks. The attack roll penalty doesn't matter all that much because you have reckless attack, which is going to provide advantage on all the melee attacks that you do. And that significantly mitigates this attack roll penalty. If you add something else like bless onto your character, it pretty much completely negates that penalty, while at the same time you get a massive boost in damage. For those of you who haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 before, it deals with very low numbers. So this isn't a game where you're going to deal 400 damage, in a single swing. So being able to add 10 damage onto attack is a big deal, and this will make a major difference in your damage output. Now, of course, this is a throwing weapon build or run that I did, but the thing is, there'll be a lot of situations where it just doesn't make sense to throw weapons, and for quite a bit of the game, Azog served as my main tank or frontline fighter, so I really wanted him going out and interfacing with the enemies directly. And so because of that, it was definitely to my advantage to have something like this that focused on regular melee attacks, because it would benefit him during those times where throwing his weapon just didn't make much sense. At level 5, you're finally going to get your extra attack. And so this is going to allow you to do 2 attacks in one turn. Definitely a huge increase to the amount of damage you can do. You're also going to get fast movement, which allows your movement speed to be increased by 3 meters when not wearing heavy armor. Especially for a frontline fighter, movement speed is very important, so this is great to have. At level 6, you're going to get another rage charge, and you're going to get mindless rage, which means while frenzied, you can't be charmed or frightened, and calm emotions no longer injure rage. Personally, I would say that this doesn't really matter, even on Tactician. It seemed like it was very rare the times when I was charmed or frightened, and there was only 1 or 2 times that someone attempted to use calm emotions against me. At level 7, you get Feral Instinct, which makes you immune to being surprised, and you get a +3 bonus to initiative. The immunity to being surprised is irrelevant. There are very few times in the game where you cannot avoid being surprised. All you have to do is perceive that there are enemies that are attempting to get the jump on you. So you always want somebody on the team who's proficient in perception, and in this case it would be you. But the +3 bonus to initiative, again, initiative is huge. You want your character acting as soon as possible, so that is really nice. At level 8, we get to choose another feat, so I would get Tavern Brawler. And this means when you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or throw something, which is what's important to us, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls. Very nice. This is obviously going to help our throw attacks do a lot more damage, and you could put 1 point into ability, so we'll go ahead and put a point into strength. And then at level 9, we're going to jump over to Fighter, which is going to allow us to pick up another feat along with a handy skill that'll allow us to pump out more damage. As far as fighting style, you could go with Defense to get a +1 bonus to armor class, but again, for me personally, I feel like you should just accept that the Barbarian is going to get hit and make sure he has enough health in order to be able to absorb those hits, and instead go all out for damage. So I would go with Great Weapon Fighting, which is triggered when you roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die for an attack with a 2-handed melee weapon, which you should definitely be using. It's going to allow you to re-roll that die once. So this is going to really help to ensure, not really help, it's not going to make a huge difference, but still, it's going to make a little bit of difference to try to make sure you're pumping out as much damage as possible. And then at Fighter level 2, we get the creme de la creme of the class, Action Surge. It allows you to immediately gain an extra action to use that turn. This is fantastic to have. So that means we can do an attack, then do an extra attack, then trigger Action Surge, and that allows us to do another attack with that action, and then that will trigger extra attack again. So you can do 4, depending on the situation, 5 attacks in one turn. Just absolutely fantastic. This is going to allow us to really level enemies. And then at final level 3, you get to choose a subclass. I feel like both Battle Master and Champion fit Azog pretty well. So you can go with whichever one you prefer. Me personally, I like Champion a little bit more. I like the fact that it's going to lower the roll that we have to do in order to get a critical hit. It's just going to help you pump out more damage, but Battle Master obviously has some fantastic maneuvers that can help you as well, so it's more of a preference thing, but yeah, I go with Champion. Now, when it comes to feats, you have a couple of different options. On the one hand, you could go with ability improvement and put 2 points into strength. I personally don't like that because I don't feel like you need to use ability improvement for strength-based builds. You get the 1 point for strength from the Hag. You can get another 2 points from the Vampire vendor in Act 2. And then you can get another 2 points on strength from using the bull strength clothing. So with all that together, it's going to pump your strength up to 22 anyway. So I feel like you don't need to burn a feat to do what those things would do for you. So instead, I personally prefer to take Sentinel, and this is going to give us advantage on opportunity attacks and ensure that enemies cannot move when you hit with an opportunity attack. And if an enemy within melee range attacks one of your allies, in my case Minthara, you can use a reaction to make a weapon attack against that enemy. So for me, I think this is a much better use of a feat within the build, but you might prefer to use some of the other clothing options available, especially late game. And so it might make more sense for you to take ability improvement and put those 2 points into strength. All right, now let's go over some of the items that I used throughout my playthrough. So when it comes to the headpiece, I use the Horns of the Berserker. That gives me a +2 bonus to attack rolls when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. In addition to this, unarmed and melee attacks deal an extra 2 necrotic damage as long as I don't have full health, which of course isn't that hard to do because its AC isn't really crazy high. If I don't deal any damage that turn, I'm going to take 1d4 necrotic damage at the end of my turn. But again, this isn't a concern. Azog is always dealing damage. That's always the focus, so no problems there. For my cloak, I wear a Cloak of Protection. It gives me a +1 to armor class and saving throws. For my clothing, I wear the Mighty Cloth. So this is going to give me bull strength and increase my strength by a score of 2 to a maximum of 20. It also means I can't be pushed against my will. So if I wanted to, I could probably take athletics off as one of the skills I have proficiency in and put that proficiency in another skill. And I also have advantage on saving throws against being restrained, and it also gives me Bull Rush, which is a way to charge forward and get into melee range against other enemies. So all around, very nice to have. And as you can see, my strength is 22. An alternative option, if you would rather use ability improvement and increase your strength, is the Enraging Heart Garb, which while raging allows me to generate 2 turns of wrath, and wrath is going to give me bonus damage to my melee weapons, and it's going to increase my constitution by 2 up to 20. So it would allow me technically to get some additional AC if I was not wearing this necklace, which is the Amulet of Greater Health, and sets my constitution score to 23. So this is why I feel like at the end of the day, the Mighty Cloth is the superior option. Before you have access to the Amulet of Greater Health, the Heart Garb might be a little better go, but definitely once you have this one doesn't make nearly as much sense. So you might as well have the Mighty Cloth, and then you can put that feat somewhere else. So that definitely worked for me. As far as the gloves, I have the gloves of Uninhibited Kushugo. The wearer deals an additional 1d4 damage with throw attacks and attacks made with improvised weapons, so making my throw attacks a little bit more powerful. Speaking of which, I also have a ring that allows me to get an additional 1d4 bonus to throw damage. Remember again, Baldur's Gate 3 deals with very low numbers, so this is essentially 1d8, or rather 2d8. that we can gain from throw damage. That's a really nice amount, especially when you consider that I attack multiple times per turn. So each time rather that I attack, these are going to trigger and do additional damage for me. Great stuff. And then the other ring allows my melee, allows my weapon attacks rather to deal 2 acid damage. So again, stacking more damage on top of it, try to make these attacks as powerful as I possibly can get them. For the boots, it gives me an additional +1 to armor class and saving throws, as long as I'm not wearing armor or holding a shield, which I never am, so this is great. And then my jump distance is increased by 1.5 meters, which allows me to get around the battlefield much easier. And I get brutal leap, which allows you to leap at a target and possibly knock it prone, which can obviously be very useful. As far as the bow, I have Deadshot, which reduces the number I need to roll to get a critical hit by 1. So that, on top of being a champion, really helps me to trigger critical attacks more often. And then it also allows me to double my proficiency bonus when rolling ranged weapon attacks with this weapon, which comes into play basically never, because when I need to do a ranged attack, I throw my melee weapon. I almost never, in fact, there's no almost, I never use the bow. So it's really just the critical hit part that matters. And then for my main weapon, I use Nirulna. This weapon will return to your hand when thrown, and it's not the only one of this sort. So I'm pretty sure in Act 1, when you're at the Druid's Grove, there's a weapon that you can purchase somewhere there that'll do the same thing, allow you to throw the weapon, and then it automatically returns to your hand, allowing you to use it on a consistent basis. And I can also not be forced to drop the trident, but when thrown, the weapon creates an explosion that deals either between 3 and 12 thunder damage and a 6-meter blast centered on the target. I also gain a 3-meter bonus to movement speed and jump distance, and equipping this weapon gives me immunity to falling damage, which shouldn't come into play that often, but you know, enemies love to push you off cliffs, so it's still nice to have. And then this object shines with a glowing light and a radius of 6 meters. So just all the way around, this is something that's really cool to have. The fact that it does thunder damage around enemies that you hit with this means that when you throw, you can damage multiple enemies. So it's really nice putting down a black hole, pulling a bunch of enemies together, and then throwing this spear in the middle and doing decent damage to all of them. Great stuff. Now, there are also some Illithid powers that were really crucial for me during this build. So obviously just about everybody gets favorable beginnings. The first attack roll or ability check you make against a target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. This is massive, really helps you in combat. So pretty much all of my party members always have this. And then also Luck of the Far Realms. Once per long rest, you can change a successful attack roll against a foe into a critical hit. This is another one that I get on virtually all of the party members because it's just fantastic to have. Late game, I ended up picking up Illithid Expertise, which is going to give me expertise in persuasion, deception, and intimidation checks. Obviously, Azog doesn't do well in any of those areas or most of those areas. So it was really nice to be able to pick that up by the third act. Perilous Stakes. Invest a creature with power that heals it when it attacks, but also makes it vulnerable to all damage. This is basically a boss killer. It doesn't matter that creatures are able to heal when they attack, because when you use this, it should be at a time when you're going to absolutely light up the boss anyway, and it shouldn't get another turn. And so on bosses that have ways to really mitigate the damage that you do, this is just great to be able to pull out. Now, it doesn't make it clear in the description here, but it is possible for enemies to resist this, it seems. Like I ran into a couple of enemies that I basically had a 0% chance to be able to hit this on them with, but the vast majority of bosses in the game are susceptible to this, so it's still definitely great to have. Psionic Backlash. When an enemy within 9 meters casts a spell, you can use your reaction to inflict 1d4 psychic damage to the caster per the spell's level. Since you're not going to have counterspell, this is a great option because it gives you a way to punish spellcasters, even though that you can't actually stop their spells. And then obviously Call the Weak is going to be absolutely fantastic for this build. When you bring a creature down to fewer hit points than your number of evolved powers, it dies and all nearby creatures take 1d4 psychic damage. I took all the Illithid powers, so that basically means anytime I get an enemy below 20 hit points, this is going to trigger. And if I'm able to pull enemies together into a small area, this can easily trigger over and over again, because that 1d4 might reduce an enemy below 20, or it might outright kill them, and it's just going to trigger things all over again. So definitely this is great to have. Speaking of pulling all the enemies together into one spot, Black Hole was something that I also used on a regular basis. It's going to slow all the enemies that are impacted and then also pull them into the same space. So that was a great option to have, whether I wanted to trigger Call the Weak, or I wanted to be able to throw the spear, or I was going to have Shadowheart use some sort of area of effect. Black Hole was a great way to allow me to control the battlefield. Psionic Dominance triggers when an enemy uses a spell of a level that is lower than or equal to your proficiency bonus. So by end game, that's basically 4 or lower, and it allows you to flat out negate it. So unlike Counterspell, which gives you a chance to negate it, this will automatically negate it. Definitely fantastic to have. There are a ton of spellcasters when you get to Act 3, so being able to just shut them down like this was something that I used all the time. All right, let's go ahead and get into a combat example. So we'll go ahead and start with activating Frenzy. And we'll just go ahead and start throwing. We got low ground, but I'm not really worried about that. Now, the only disadvantage of playing this way is that sometimes it takes a second before the spear will come back. It doesn't come back immediately the way it should. Doesn't seem like that's been a problem right now, but you definitely want to make sure it's back in your hands before you move on. As you can see, sorry, I should be showing damage numbers. As you can see, we're usually hitting somewhere around somewhere between 30 and 40, sometimes a little bit more than 40 as well. But then in addition to the regular damage, we're also doing thunder damage to the people around us and causing displace on them. Creatures suffering falling damage because you're actually taking additional 1d8 psychic damage. It's weird the way this works. They don't actually have to go off a cliff. But as you can see, the damage is coming out steadily. We do have a speed potion on, so I am hasted. So that's giving me a couple more attacks than what I would usually have. But now we finally run out of attacks. We can still just go ahead and use Action Surge. And you know what? I'll just run up to show like this works whether you're at range or if you're up close. Either way, he does absolutely brutal damage. Fantastic stuff. All right, we're back again. Let's get a little bit closer. And there are two people there together, so my AoE is going to help hit them a little bit more. He only has 17 hit points, so in fact, let's see if we can, let's target her directly. Yeah, got her. Awesome. Yep, all right, the second one's taken care of, and she's in bad shape as well. And we'll just go ahead and paralyze her for good measure. Oh, but she's already dead. And then you see now we still have our bonus attack, so we can do an enraged throw here. Not sure if there's anybody in range for us to be able to do that on. Unfortunately, here, let's see. Will it allow us? Hey, we can get to the edge here. And then we'll use our bonus attack. So again, in this example, if this was the melee attack version, we would take Frenzy Strain, but we've wiped out so many enemies, it doesn't matter if we reduce our attack a little bit. Like, we're still going to be fine. All right. It hit a bunch of our allies, but it doesn't matter. And not only did it hit this guy, but now he's prone on the ground, which is going to make it much easier to take him out. So I think that shows that this build was awesome. I had a great time with this build, whether you were up close or going at range. Basically, Azog was able to do everything that I wanted him to. And again, I did this run on Tactician. So on the hardest difficulty, this build absolutely slaps, and you should be able to have a great time with it. Anyway, that's the video. Looking forward to you all's feedback, and hope you all have a great day. Take care.